Mr. Chairman, General Mukasey, welcome. Let me, as we conclude today, let me turn to a subject that has frankly not come up. It's the question of political influence or possible political influence over prosecutions. There have been 3 instances in the last year when this committee has received sworn testimony regarding the possibility that there were political considerations brought to bear around charging decisions by local U.S. attorneys. In my state, I represent the state of Alabama, a woman who happens to be a Republican testified under oath before the committee, staff in private session, and provided a sworn affidavit to the committee. She alleged that she was present during a conversation in which Republican political operatives discussed the viability of prosecuting or the desirability of prosecuting the governor of Alabama, whom they happened to be locked in a political contest with. She also said in her sworn testimony that she was told on another occasion that the former Deputy Chief of Staff to the President, Mr. Rove, had contacted senior officials of the Department of Justice and spoken about the desirability of prosecuting the former governor of Alabama. This committee also heard sworn testimony from David Iglesias, who is United States Attorney in New Mexico, who asserts that a member of the United States Congress and a member of the United States Senate both contacted him to inquire about the status of ongoing investigations and to question whether sealed indictments might be unsealed in time to shape the November 2006 elections. And finally, John McKay, formerly the United States Attorney in Seattle, Washington, testified before this committee that he received a phone call from the Chief of Staff to a member of Congress questioning about whether he, McKay, intended to bring a particular prosecution. I understand that you have not had an opportunity to make an assessment of whether those claims are accurate or not, but I want to pose this set of questions to you. Can you think of any instance, based on your knowledge of the law, in which it would be appropriate for a political operative to urge that a U.S. attorney prosecute someone?
I can't consider any circumstance in which it would be appropriate for the U.S. attorney to have such a conversation.
Can you conceive of any circumstance in which it would be appropriate for a United States senator to pick up the telephone and ask a U.S. attorney about the status of an investigation?
Once again, I can't conceive of any circumstance in which it would be proper for the United States attorney to respond to any inquiry from any political figure about the bringing or the withholding of a prosecutive decision.
Can you think of any instance in which it would be appropriate for the Deputy Chief of Staff, who had no legal counsel responsibilities under President Bush, can you think of any circumstance in which it would be appropriate for that individual to have contacted senior officials at the Department of Justice to urge the prosecution of a former governor?
I've issued guidelines with regard to contacts between...
But just to answer that question as you answered the others, can you think of any instance of appropriateness regarding that scenario?
There is a limited number of people, limited to a very small number.
I understand that, and I will get to that, but just so we can follow the line of questions, can you think of any instance in which it would be appropriate for a Deputy Chief of Staff to inquire of a senior official about the status of a case?
I can't think of a circumstance in which it would be appropriate for a senior official to respond to an inquiry of that sort with information about whether a prosecution is going forward or not going forward.
So, given those statements, General, given that the allegations have been made under oath before those committee in all 3 instances, first question, how much would it concern you if all 3 of these sworn statements were true?
I can't quantify my level of concern. What I can tell you...
Would it be a high level of concern?
I don't think that it is appropriate for United States attorneys to be talking to political people about...
So, given that, and I'm pushing you because our time is limited, given that, what steps have you taken to determine whether the claims of the Alabama lawyer or Mr. Iglesias or Mr. McKay are accurate?
The case involving the Alabama lawyer is, I believe, sub judice before a circuit court.
But you understand that that is not a subject of the appeal. That's in no way the subject of what's being in the appeal. The question of whether there were improper contacts.
That's an interesting point, because as far as I know, there's been no request for a remand.
Well, but what I'm asking you, sir, if I can just have an answer to my question, Mr. Chairman, what steps have you taken in any of those three instances to determine whether or not since you've stated that all three would raise serious concerns, you've stated that all three, if so, would be improper. As the current Attorney General, what steps have you taken to see if these improprieties in fact happen, sir?
I've limited myself to the participation of the people on the other end of the telephone call, and I have not made direct inquiry as to whether those instances occurred or what those responses were. I have made clear...
Given your concerns, why not?
I have made clear to the Department that it is not proper for anybody.
But if it's happened in the past,
Chairman,
General...
once again, regular order.
I'm simply seeking an answer to my question, Mr. Chairman. Given that it may have happened in the past, given that allegations have been made under oath before this committee in public and private testimony, given that two of those allegations have been repeated before the U.S. Senate, given that you think it's inappropriate if these events happen, what steps have you taken to determine whether or not they occurred?
If any impropriety or any lapse of proper standards was engaged in by any United States attorney, that would be a subject initially for the Office of Professional Responsibility.
Has the OPR conducted investigations of those instances?
Gentleman's time has expired. And before we